just a little bit confused by how the media, people in our business, former business, could look at the last debate with Biden and Trump and say, I just can't believe that there's something wrong with him, that he's neurologically compromised or ill or senile or whatever, that he's not operating the way that he used to. How could this be news to people who've interviewed him before?
Well, I think this is a real opportunity to gather more data and to take an investigative lens and look at this issue of President Biden and his decision to seek re-election. We've got some data points already. We have the debate that you've just referenced, that people were so surprised at his demeanor. And we now have this ABC interview and the full transcript. I think it's a moment where other media organizations who've done interviews with the president over the last couple of years could release the full transcripts from those interviews. I think it makes sense because we'd have broader data points to assess, was this a one-off, as the White House says, or were there indications of decline earlier on? Were they obvious and apparent, or were they subtle and missed? And if they were obvious, why was it that they seemed to end up on the cutting room floor? I think that having this broader data set for an independent review would really inform the public discussion about the president's decision to stay in the race.
And there's a lot of data to look at. I mean, I've known Biden, watched Biden, been around Biden a lot for over 30 years. And I remember my reaction in 2019 when he decided to run once again for president for the fourth time, I think. I thought, that's not the guy I know. I mean, he's just completely different. And then his sister told a friend of mine, actually, we're very upset because he's in cognitive decline. He's got some neurological illness, and we don't want him to run for president. So I immediately said that on Fox News.
So you reported that at the time?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then I showed the tape, like, look at this guy, and was attacked, of course, and ignored. So that was 5 years ago. I wasn't shocked by his performance of the debate, especially. But then other journalists were. They seemed to be. Were they pretending, or like what? I don't understand how someone who did an interview with him like 2 years ago wouldn't have been aware that there was something wrong.
Well, I think it's an opportunity to provide this broader data set so there can be this independent review by the public.
What would that data look like?
Well, let's look at what the transcripts show. Do they show someone who is, very consistent, very focused, very deliberate in their answering of questions? Or does it show someone who's maybe struggling to stay on track or is lacking
Do we have
focus?
The transcripts?
Well, media outlets who've conducted interviews with the president should have those transcripts. I mean, it's not standard to release video outtakes from an interview, but you could release the transcript. And I say that as someone who released a transcript of my interview with President Trump back in 2020. Releasing a transcript, I think, is about transparency. So you can have a broad overview of the interview. I think it makes sense because there are other headlines in the interview that maybe your news organization is not going to look at per se. Just sort of separately, I think you have a tremendous responsibility when you sit down with the president of the United States, probably the ultimate newsmaker, to ask questions that are of interest to your news organization, but also to others, right? And then finally, I think a transcript allows you to stand behind the edit that you either post online or that you broadcast, right? Because then the public can see the sections of the interview that you condensed or you made edits for clarification.
Right. So I know that I haven't thought about this enough, but I know that in 2015 or 2016, the New York Times editorial board sat down with Trump and they released a full, apparently unedited transcript, which was chaotic. His speaking style tends to be a little discursive.
That's a great word, discursive.
Yeah, it is nonlinear. But that's well known. I think he's much better on camera than he is, in transcripts. But whatever you think of it, that they put that out there. I don't remember in the last 4 years any news organization that interviewed Biden, and there have been some, releasing a transcript of the interview. Do you?
I can't recall, but I haven't gone back and looked at all of them. But
so like, what would be so I guess what bothers me is that everyone acts like this was a shock. It was not a shock to me. I have no special knowledge. I had some special knowledge, which I revealed immediately, but it was like super obvious every time I saw him, there's something wrong with that guy. How could the journalists be shocked? Well, why don't they just release immediately? Well,
they could. That's what I think makes a lot of sense right now to do that. That's ultimately up to them. But I think it just goes to transparency. I think it goes to informing the public discussion right now about the president's fitness for office and to seek reelection. And I think it's also about standing behind your work, right? Like, you decided to make edits in the process for clarity, for time, whatever the issue is.
Right.
And so you can really stand behind that. I think that's important.
But so, again, you were in this business for so long, and me too, and at a time, pre-internet, pre-streaming, where you have a very small chunk of time, 3, 5, 6 minutes for the long ones, and then you just can't use the rest. But now, news organizations should just put the whole thing. I mean, that's what we do. This interview is not edited in any way. And if, we'll just let viewers decide what they think of Catherine Herridge or me or whatever, right? But so what would be the excuse that, say, NBC or CBS or ABC or Fox or anybody would have to not put the full thing online now?
I mean, I can't speak to what their rationale would be. I just know in my case, I felt it was important to release a transcript, to allow people to see the work, and to also, I mean, it's hard to look at your own transcript because you look at it and you say, oh, that question could have been more focused, or I should have followed up more, or I missed that little piece of news. I should have drilled down a little further, or I interrupted there when I really shouldn't have. I mean, it's really kind of warts and all process that you're looking at, but it's about sort of the raw integrity of the interview. When you make edits in an interview, you do it for clarity. Sometimes you do it because you have to condense things because you only have a certain amount of time on a broadcast. But it's a real fine line and a balancing act. And you don't want, seeking clarity and brevity or condensing it to cross the line into, a cleanup on aisle 7.
Well, that's what it feels like, though. It does feel like, I don't want to be too judgy. I was telling you at breakfast this morning, I edited something out of an interview once with somebody. I can't remember ever doing that before or since, and I would not do that now. But several years ago, someone said something so bizarre in an interview that I didn't want to follow up on it because I don't know, what the hell are you even talking about? Mm-hmm. And so I asked the editors to take that out just because I didn't think it was relevant to the conversation. It was weird. Mm-hmm. So whatever, I did that. I'll say that I did that. But if you're interviewing someone and he seems like bizarre through the whole interview and you find yourself trying to cover that up, then maybe you're a liar. Mm-hmm. Do you think?
Well, I think the instinct when you sit down with the president of the United States is, this is your president. You want them to look their best. I mean, I understand that. Right. But if there were indicators, and I don't know there were, but if there were indicators that he was in decline or he was really struggling to answer a series of questions, I mean, that's news. Right? I mean, that's a news headline.
Well, and the opposite of news is, of course, censorship and deception. So if you're hiding that, then you're committing, a moral crime, but you're also committing an offense against the profession that you chose, whose purpose is to inform the public of what reality is, right? And you're hiding things rather than exposing them. And that's pretty clear violation, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's an opportunity to build the data set, to better understand what's happened over the last couple of years and, really apply that investigative lens. I find it so hard to take off my investigative reporter hat, but that's sort of how I see it right now. I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious to see what those transcripts may reflect.
Well, in 2016, NBC went and back into its archives and found an outtake of Donald Trump saying something vulgar to Billy Bush, the host, about women and grabbing them and all this stuff. And then they leaked it to David Fahrenthold. I think I'm remembering this correctly.
I can't remember that exactly, but it came out publicly.
If I've gotten that wrong, pardon me. But they leaked it to a Washington Post reporter who had been a college friend of an NBC executive. And then it became this huge thing that, almost derailed Trump's campaign. And that's why they did it, of course. So there's precedent for showing us the outtakes. Mm-hmm. Do they have an excuse not to show it to the Biden outtakes?
I mean, I can't really speak for them. I'm sorry to sort of be a little evasive about that. I just would advocate for it. I think that it's an issue of such import to the country, and it really informs the discussion and the discourse surrounding this issue. And it goes to accountability with the White House. Was it really a bad night, or was there a broader trend that had been developing?
Yeah. I mean, I feel totally qualified to pass judgment on that question. say this
over
is
to you.
like- well,
Over
it's
to
just I knew the guy, and that's not Biden. Like that's not the guy I remember. Who, and I mean this. I never agreed with him, but I'm a shallow person. So is he. So I always kind of liked him because he's Irish guy, throw his arm around you. How you doing, buddy? Rub your chest. Maybe he sniffed me. I don't care. I like sniffing. And that's just not the guy on TV at all. At all. I mean, if I was a conspiracy nut, I would think he was a body double because it's that different.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.